right, hello everyone. Good morning. Okay, Genesis chapter 18. There's an interesting and funny incident here where the three figures, three angelic figures that actually is manifestation of God's presence. It's kind of interesting. It's three. But anyway, it comes to Abraham and says, "Oh, by next year, Sarah will be having a child." And then this is what she responds. Now, as Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years, the way of women have ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I'm worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" So she was kind of behind the tent, laughing to herself. And then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "No, but you did laugh." Kind of funny, like this kind of exchange. But it's kind of scary actually from Sarah's perspective, right? She was afraid, of course, because she was laughing to herself, So that's the thing that you know, right? She laughed to herself, which is something that I noticed this time around. I guess like, what does that mean? Like she wasn't laughing out loud. Internal snicker, maybe it's an internal snicker like saying, "Yeah, right, after I'm worn out, after my husband is old, now, really, I'm gonna have a child. Yeah, right." This "yeah, right" kind of thing, because this reality of her age and the fact that she's old, he's old. I mean, obviously she knew this from before, and this cynicism because of her age must have been with her all along. This internal snicker must have been with her all along, and yet she just moved along with Abraham and kind of went with Abraham. All like while Abraham is getting all these promises, she's like, yeah. And although actually, I guess we did see glimpses of this cynicism in her conspiracy with Hagar and things like that. But yeah, this "yeah, right" mentality, this "yeah, right," internal snickering and cynicism. I think we really need to watch out for that in our own hearts. You can hear some guy with when you see these commercials, some guy with a vision talking about how this is gonna happen, and they try to sell you something, whatever. And my initial response, maybe because I'm a cynic at heart, it's like, "Yeah, right," and there's an internal laughter. I laugh to myself. Yeah, right, But if you carry that kind of attitude toward all of life, especially if you carry that attitude toward God's vision for your life, God has a vision for your life, and you say, "Yeah, right" to that, I think that would be really, really tragic, So when God says one day you should lead others, one day you should go and spread the gospel and plant churches and make disciples of all nations, and then you say, "Yeah, right, I'm old, yeah, right, I have all these deficiencies." After all these years, you really now? And God's vision for our lives, when God's vision for our lives comes, let's make sure that it is not met with this kind of cynicism, but rather with faith. One more thing is that then the Lord said, "Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me." So this, we see a glimpse of God here. I mean, first, there's this kind of Abel's blood crying out that it is reminiscent of that. This whole thing, like there's an outcry that has come to me, because of the sin, and now God is going to judge. And people actually have problems with this kind of judgment of God. Heaven and hell, like people don't seem to really have that much of a problem with it, except maybe hell, but not as much as this actually. But the idea of God judging people on earth physically, like the flood, man, that's like problematic. And Sodom and Gomorrah, these seem very problematic, even though there's like supernatural. It's not like, I can see why it's problematic if it's like wars and human beings are involved in that, and therefore like you wonder like, well, how do you know that you are actually carrying out the judgment of God? But this is actually flood and Sodom and Gomorrah. They are supernatural judgments. Now this seems problematic, but you know what? Is it problematic? Isn't it equally problematic that God would just simply let people be, even though there are all these victims of human sin, even though there's an outcry that has come to God. There's blood of victims strewn throughout history and history of humanity and in our own lives. But God's not going to physically judge, really? He's just going to wait until after death? Well, that's also equally problematic. That's actually the problem of evil, isn't it? If the fact that God doesn't judge. So we need to keep that in tension, these two things in tension in our minds as we ask the question, does God have the right to judge humanity? Or does he have the right to judge me? And the answer is yes. Yes, he does have the right to judge. Yet there is mercy. That's what you see in this strange bargaining conversation between Abraham and God. There is this God relents, and he keeps on relenting. And we see a picture of mercy, of God in the midst of judgment even. And ultimately, I think we see this hope of mercy in the story of Lot's rescue out of Sodom. So that's sort of the context and the thoughts that I had about that. So, all right, that's it. Bye.